Civil war doesn't begin with a bang. It doesn't start with armies marching on a battlefield or a declaration signed in a grand hall. It begins with silence. It starts when a neighbor stops talking to a neighbor, when the news becomes a weapon, when a political opponent is no longer viewed as simply wrong, but as evil. History is littered with the ashes of nations that thought they were too stable to fall. The Roman Republic believed its laws were eternal. The Spanish Empire believed its culture was unbreakable. Syria believed its modern economy would hold. They were all wrong. They all ignored the pattern of specific, terrifying sequence of events that repeats century after century. It is a mathematical progression of social decay. We have analyzed the collapse of currencies and the fall of empires on this channel before. But today, we are looking inward. Historians and sociologists have identified 5 distinct stages that lead a nation from peace to total internal war. Rome went through all 5. Spain went through all 5. And if you look at the date the riots, the rhetoric, and the rage consuming the West today, we'll realize something chilling. We are no longer at the beginning. We are already at stage 3. And stage 4 is just one bad day away. To understand civil war, we must first unlearn what Hollywood has taught us. We imagine civil war as 2 distinct armies wearing different colored uniforms meeting in a field. That is the warfare of the 19th century. That is not how nations die today. Modern civil conflict, what intelligence agencies refer to as instability events, is far more complex. 'Tis a slow erosion of the monopoly on violence. It happens when the state loses the trust of its people, and the people lose trust in each other. This is what the ancient Greeks called stasis. It describes a state of internal feud that freezes a society, making governance impossible. In our previous analysis of the 6-stage revolution cycle, we saw how governments are overthrown by the people. But civil war is different. A revolution is the people against the state. A civil war is the people against the people. It is driven by a feedback loop of polarization. And just like the death spiral we warned you about, once this centrifugal force begins, it is mathematically difficult to stop. So, what does this pattern look like? How did the greatest civilizations on Earth convince themselves to tear their own houses down? To find the answer, we have to rewind the clock. Let's look at the Roman Republic. Before Rome became an empire ruled by Caesars, it was a republic ruled by laws. It was the most sophisticated political system the world had ever seen, designed specifically to prevent tyranny. But by 133 BC, the wealth gap had become insurmountable. The elites, the patricians, hoarded land, while the common plebeians starved in the streets of the capital. Enter the Gracchi brothers. They were populist politicians who tried to pass land reform to save the poor. They didn't use armies. They used rhetoric. They polarized the public to gain power. The Senate, terrified of losing their influence, broke a centuries-old taboo. They introduced violence into the political chamber. A mob of senators and their supporters beat Tiberius Gracchus to death with wooden chairs. That was the moment. The norms were broken. Once violence was normalized, it escalated. It went from street brawls to gang warfare, and finally, 2 generals marching full legions on Rome itself. The Republic didn't die because of barbarians at the gates. It died because 2 factions within the city couldn't share the same reality anymore. Fast forward to Spain in 1936. This wasn't ancient history. This was a modern Western democracy. Spain had a constitution, a parliament, liberal cities, and conservative countrysides. But the political center collapsed. You were either a communist or a fascist. There was no middle ground. The media on both sides dehumanized the other. If the right won an election, the left called it illegitimate. If the left won, the right called it a stolen victory. The breaking point wasn't a formal war declaration, 'twas a murder. The assassination of opposition leader José Calvo Sotelo by police forces loyal to the government was the spark. General Franco launched a coup, and within days, neighbors were executing neighbors. Teachers, priests, union workers, your political identity became your death sentence. Spain proved that a civilized, modern democracy can descend into barbarism in less than 30 days if the polarization is deep enough. And they all followed the same script. When we analyze these catastrophes from Rome to Rwanda, from Sarajevo to Syria, a universal 5-stage framework emerges. Once you see these stages, you cannot unsee them. Stage 1 is precondition or polarization. This is the foundation. The society splits into 2 distinct camps based on identity, class, or ideology. They stop consuming the same information. They live in different realities. The opposition becomes the enemy. Stage 2 is loss of legitimacy. The citizens lose faith in the referees. The courts, the media, and the electoral process are viewed as rigged or biased, when people believe the system cannot resolve their disputes fairly. They begin looking for extra-legal solutions. Stage 3 is sporadic political violence. This is the critical threshold. Violence moves from the fringe to the mainstream. Riots are excused as protests. Assassination attempts occur. Lone wolf attacks increase. Importantly, the violence is justified by the perpetrators as self-defense against the other side. Stage 4 is insurgency. The anger becomes organized. Paramilitary groups form. Militias start training. Political parties form armed wings. The state loses its monopoly on violence. Certain no-go zones appear where the government has no authority. Stage 5 is full conflict. A trigger event occurs: a contested election, a high-profile assassination, or an economic collapse. The organized factions mobilize. The military fractures. War begins. Now, take a deep breath. Look at that list again, and ask yourself, where is the United States today? Let's be honest with ourselves. Stage 1. Polarization, achieved years ago. The United States is now geographically and culturally segregated. Red states and blue states operate like different countries. The data shows that over 40% of both Democrats and Republicans view the other party as a threat to the nation's well-being. They don't just disagree on tax policy. They disagree on what reality is. Stage 2. Loss of legitimacy. Check. We have seen presidents claim elections are stolen. We have seen the Supreme Court's legitimacy attacked daily. Trust in mass media is at an all-time low. Half the country believes the system is rigged against them no matter who is in charge. Stage 3. Sporadic political violence. We are living in it right now. We have seen summers of burning cities. We have seen a mob storm the Capitol building. We have seen assassination attempts on Supreme Court justices and former presidents. We have normalized the idea that if you don't like the outcome, you can burn it down. This is exactly where Rome was before Sulla. This is exactly where Spain was in early 1936. America is currently vibrating at the frequency of Stage 3. The transition to Stage 4 organization is subtle, but it is happening. We see the rise of community defense groups. We see local sheriffs refusing to enforce federal laws. We see states defying the federal government on border issues. The infrastructure for conflict is being laid. The cold civil war is already here. The only thing missing is the kinetic organization of Stage 4 and the spark of Stage 5. But why is this happening now? It connects back to the industrial collapse pattern and the instability of the petrodollar. When an empire's economy stops growing for the middle class, the social contract breaks. When people cannot afford a home, when their currency is debased, they get angry. And demagogues direct that anger toward internal enemies. Economic decline is the fuel. Polarization is the match. So what happens if we tip into Stage 4 and 5? A second American Civil War will not look like the first one. There will be no Gettysburg. There will be no lines of muskets. It will look like the troubles in Northern Ireland or the years of lead in Italy, but on a continental scale. It will be a war of fragmentation. It will involve cyber attacks on the power grid, conducted by domestic actors. It will involve targeted assassinations of local judges and officials. It will involve trucks stopping deliveries to hostile cities. Your dollar, which we already know, is in danger, would hyperinflate overnight as the world dumps U.S. debt. The global financial system, which relies on American stability, would freeze. The Pax Americana that has held the world together since 1945 would evaporate. Russia, China, and Iran would immediately move to settle their own scores while America is distracted. The collapse of the American interior means the collapse of the global order. It is sudden. It is brutal. And once the violence starts, history tells us it typically lasts for a decade before stability returns. The Stoic philosopher Seneca said, "We are mad, not only individually, but nationally." The pattern of civil war is not a prophecy. It is a warning. It is a diagnosis. Rome didn't have to fall. Spain didn't have to tear itself apart. They chose to ignore the stages. They chose to double down on hatred rather than compromise. We are at stage 3. The warning lights are flashing red. The alarms are screaming. History is a wheel. It crushes those who refuse to see it turning. We have shown you the economic signs, the currency signs, and now the sociological signs. The puzzle is complete. The question is, what will you do when the wheel turns again? For more analysis on the hidden patterns controlling our world, make sure you are subscribed to Economy Rewind. The past is the only map we have for the future. Don't lose it.